Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So we have completed the isti'adha. And we talked about recitation of the Fatiha when you're praying alone and also when you're praying behind the Imam. We mentioned Ameen as well, Ta'meen. Isti'adha, what is the ruling for isti'adha? Is it a wajib, obligatory, or is it a sunnah? What would you say? Yeah, some scholars, but the majority said it's not wajib. Majority said it's sunnah. It's probably a wajib, but it's a wajib for the recitation because it's a general ayah. فَإِذَا قَرَأْتَ الْقُرْآنَ فَاسْتَعِذْ. So it's a wajib, it's an obligatory act for the recitation of the Quran, whether you recite it in salah or after or outside. Although the majority of scholars consider it as sunnah anyhow.
But if someone is reciting from the mazhab.
From what?
From the mazhab, from the Quran.
Yes.
Or any recitation at all.
Yes. It's a strong sunnah to say A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajeem in general. So it is like this for the Quran itself. Maybe not for the salah particular, so it's a wajib in general. Better to say it. The majority of scholars say it's a sunnah for the salah. It's a sunnah, okay? What else was I going to mention? A takbir al-intiqal. The takbir that you say upon transition. Again, the madhab of Imam Ahmad says it's a wajib, it's obligatory. While the majority of scholars don't consider it a wajib. But there is a narration of the hadith of the man who is deficient in his salah, and that is why looking at the different narrations helps. In which Prophet ﷺ says, لا تتم صلاة لأحد من الناس حتى يتوضأ فيضع الوضوء يعني مواضعه ثم يكبر ويحمد الله جل وعز ويثني عليه. He says the salah is not complete until you do the perfect wudu, then you make takbir, then you praise Allah. ويثني عليه ويقرأ ما تيسر من القرآن, then he should recite whatever he can of the Quran. Of course, we know from other ahadith that the Fatiha is the rukn. Okay, the surah after the Fatiha, some scholars like the Hanbali scholars consider it a wajib, obligatory, while the majority of scholars consider it a sunnah. Okay, that's why grouping, when you look at the books of fiqh, they group the wajibat and sunnah together in one section because there is so much difference in opinion on how they understand the texts and the evidence. But in general, we only make this classification so that you know if the salah is terribly deficient or is it if you've left out a sunnah that will not affect the integrity of your salah. But normally they group all the sunnah and wajibat together. They try to separate the arkan because the arkan are very critical and very serious, okay? And they're obvious from the hadith of the man whose salah was deficient. What's the question? Yes.
One should be reciting.
Yeah, but the ayah doesn't talk about the salah. In general.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and just like you can use, just like فَإِذَا قَرَأْتَ الْقُرْآنَ فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ, that's a general commandment for the salah and outside of the salah. We'll see. What? No.
It does say about standing.
That is true, but no, it does say that. But if you could also understand it that there's two commandments here. One of them is to pray at night. One of them is to recite the Quran at night. It could be understood this way, and that's why some people even understood it this way. They said, فَقْرَأُوا مَا تَيَسَّرَ مِنْهُ, at the end of the surah, فَقْرَأُوا مَا تَيَسَّرَ مِنْهُ. Some people understood it to just recite the Quran at night. Some people understood it, no, it means to recite it during the salah. And then it could apply to the Fatiha, and that's it. It doesn't have to apply to the surah after the Fatiha, because in some of the narrations of the hadith of the man whose salah was deficient, he says فَقْرَأْ مَا تَيَسَّرَ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ, recite what you can of the Quran. Some narrations don't specify the Fatiha while others do, so we can understand that what he meant by what is feasible for you to recite means what is feasible here, the Fatiha. And some other narration says, and if you cannot recite the Fatiha, this is what you do. So it shows that مَا تَيَسَّرَ مِنْهُ could simply mean, or وَرَتِّلْ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا, just the Fatiha. Does not have to apply to the surah after the Quran. Anyhow, in this hadith, It is quite similar to the hadith of the man whose salah was deficient, but I think it's a total different incident because we know that hadith was only narrated by Abu Huraira and another man, Abu Awana, but this is narrated by somebody different. His name is Yahya ibn Khallad an ammihi, from his uncle. Anyhow, he says here, and then ثم يركع حتى تطمئن مفاصله. Then he should make ruku' until his joints reach a steady or a silent position. تطمئن comes to a standstill. The joints, they're not in continuous motion. You have to reach a pause. The joints have to reach, the joints of the back, the joints of the hips, the joints of the knee. Everything has to reach a pause. حتى تطمئن مفاصل. This is اطمئنان, tranquility in the salah. ثم يقول سمع الله لمن حمده. Then he should say سمع الله لمن حمده حتى يستوي قائما. ثم يقول الله أكبر ثم يسجد. So he mentioned in this hadith here that takbir, he mentioned tasmi', سمع الله لمن حمده, and this is a strong evidence for the Hanbali madhab that all these things are a wajib, they are obligatory, whether it is سمع الله لمن حمده ربنا ولك الحمد or التسميع والتحميد and the takbir of transition. This could be a strong evidence for that. And then the hadith says, after he explained, he says, فَإِذَا فَعْلَ ذَلِكَ فَقَدْ تَمَّتْ صَلَاتُهُ. If he does so, then his salah is complete. Okay. Keep going in this book here. This next part talks about recitation after the Fatiha. Yes, actually there's a hadith on reciting a surah after the Fatiha which indicates that it's not obligatory. I will actually try to find it for you. Where is it? No, that's anyhow. If I don't find it right now, I'll get it for you tomorrow. Before that. Anyhow, let's see what the Prophet ﷺ used to recite in different salawat. That's important so that we can try to follow the sunnah in this matter as much as we can. In the morning salah, Salatul Fajr. Different surahs. You don't always have to recite short or long. It could be long or short. It says here كان يقرأ فيها بطوال المفصل. Mufassal is from Surah Qaf till the end. So he says he used to use the longer of those surahs that start from Surah Qaf, like Surah Qaf, Al-Dhariyat, these kind of surahs. ونحوها من السور في الركعتين. And Surah Al-Tur, which is a longer surah from the Mufassal, he used to recite. Sometimes he used to recite Surah Qaf in each rak'ah, like each rak'ah something as long as Surah Qaf. And Surah Qaf is how many pages? 1, 2, 3 pages. So like average 2.5 to 3 pages in every rak'ah. And sometimes he used to make it short. إذا الشمس كورت إذا زلزلت الأرض زلزالها. One time he recited إذا زلزلت الأرض زلزالها in both rak'at. He repeated it deliberately to show them that, because let's say somebody recited قل هو الله أحد in the first rak'ah and came in the second rak'ah قل هو الله أحد. People behind him would say Subhanallah.
They don't consider your salah valid if you recite
the same surah. Subhanallah. Actually, the narrator of this hadith, he says, Prophet ﷺ recited إذا زلزلت الأرض زلزالها in the 2 rak'at. قال الراوي فلا أدري أنسي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أم قرأ ذلك عمدا. He says, I don't know, did he forget? Or he did it deliberately? Or did he do it deliberately? And then one time he was traveling and he recited short surahs, قل أعوذ برب الفلق وقل أعوذ برب الناس. So it's not strange. Sometimes you guys would like that, inshallah. We'll try to do that sometimes. Also, one time he recited Surah Al-Rum, which is very long, like 8 pages. And one time Surah Yasin, the whole surah. And one time Surah Al-Saffat, it's like 10 pages. And Jum'ah usually Alif Lam Mim تنزيل السجدة وهل أتى على الإنسان. And he used to make the first rak'ah longer than the second rak'ah. This is in Salat al-Fajr. So you have to alternate between sometimes long, sometimes short, based on the situation. Exactly. That's part of it as well. That's another parameter. If you have to consider the people as well, if there's children or not. Okay. So Salat al-Dhuhr, he used to recite in the first rak'ah of Salat al-Dhuhr قدر 30 آية قدر قراءة ألف لام ميم تنزيل السجدة. So he used to recite as long as you would recite Surah al-Sajda in Dhuhr Salah. Actually, in one narration, it is mentioned that they would make the iqamah for Dhuhr, and a man can go to Al-Baqiyah, which is where the graveyard, just outside Al-Baqiyah, of course, and he would, obviously outside the Baqiyah, they past it. People used to use this an area in that direction to use to relieve themselves, like use the washroom. So he would go that far, then he would go to his house, make wudu, and then catch them in the first rak'ah. So that's a long time. That's seriously, it's mentioned in hadith. This means, and that's expected, because to recite a sajda, not like the way we recite it, it will come how the Prophet ﷺ used to recite. His recitation was very slow, to the extent that you could almost count the letters behind him. And he used to elongate the mudud as well, and at the end of the ayah he would elongate it as well. So that is how. So that is why he would have enough time to do something like this. While in the second two rak'at of Dhuhr, they used to be half as long as the first two rak'at.
Sheikh, I have a question.
Hmm.
So you recite the Quran after Surah Fatiha in the first two rak'ah. This is what I understand. In the second two rak'ah, you don't. You don't recite after. You don't have to, but there are some narrations that you can as well, if you had time. We'll see that there are some hadith on this matter. Yes, if somebody does it, it's not wrong. No, it would not. I'll try to get you the hadith on that matter. Okay, it's not well known, but there's a hadith on this matter. We'll try to get it one time. Sometimes he used to recite as-sama'i wa tariq wa as-sama'i dhat al-buruj. How did they know when it's a secret salah? How did they know what he recited? He actually used to raise his voice sometimes. Yes, to teach him.
In the daylight salat.
What? No, بالتحريك, they would watch if he's reciting, but how would they know what he recited? Because he would sometimes raise the voice, sometimes with a couple of ayat, just to show them what he's saying. With السماء انشقت, what?
Sometimes you can hear the whispers too when someone is reciting.
You can as well sometimes. Salat al-Asr is usually half as long as Salat al-Dhuhr. Okay, it used to be shorter. So let's say they say about 15 verses after a Fatiha in the first two rak'at, and then the second two rak'at will be half of that. Okay, and as I said, always try to make the second rak'ah shorter than the first rak'ah. It is even mentioned that the second rak'ah in Zuhr was half the length of the first rak'ah in Zuhr. Okay, Al-Maghrib sometimes frequently would be the short surahs. But one time he recited Tula Tulayayn, the longest of the two long surahs. The two long surahs here is not Al-Baqarah or Al-Imran, it is actually Al-An'am wal-A'raf. If you ask what are At-Tulayayn, what are the two long surahs, this is how they used to give, this is a label they used to give them. Al-Baqarah, Al-Imran, what did they used to call them? They had a name. Al-Zahrawayn, the bright or the shiny. Okay, luminous surahs, Al-Zahrawayn, Baqarah, Al-Imran. At-Tulayayn, the two long surahs are Al-An'am, Al-A'raf, and you'll see that they are longer. After Baqarah, Al-Imran, they are the two longest surahs. Okay, so Zahrawayn would be Baqarah, Al-Imran, At-Tulayayn, Al-An'am, Al-A'raf. So he would recite one of those surahs in Fajr. That's like at least an hour to an hour and a half. But sometimes he would recite At-Tini wa Zaytun. That's in Maghrib. And then also Surah Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Surah Al-Tur, Al-Mursalat, so on. Al-Anfal, he used to divide Anfal between the two rak'at. Al-Shams wa Duha, Idha as-Sama'u Inshaqqat, At-Tin wa Zaytun I mentioned. Sifat Qira'at Nabi, this will come later. How he used to recite. the way he recited, but I would love to find this hadith for you. Sometimes he would recite actually 2 surahs in the same rak'ah as well. Doesn't have to be Qul Huwallahu Ahad. He can recite 2 surahs in the same rak'ah in the Fard Salah as well. Now, القراءة قراءة سورة خلف بعد الفاتحة قراءة بعد الفاتحة. نعم هذا الحديث عن أبي هريرة حديث البخاري المسلم يقول في كل صلاة يقرأ فما أسمعنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أسمعناكم. He says he used to recite in every salah some Quran, of course the Fatiha and another surah, but he says what we heard from him we have also relate to you. أسمعناكم, we also recited loudly so that you guys can understand and learn from us as well. Okay, even if it's a secret salah, you're allowed to raise your voice. Prophet ﷺ sometimes to teach people in the salah, he would actually go a couple of steps onto the minbar to show them his ruku' and sujood. Imagine this. Of course, don't do it nowadays. Yes. Somebody will pull you down. So he says, what we heard from him, we allowed you to hear as well. وَمَا أَخْفَى عَنَّا أَخْفَيْنَا عَنْكُمْ. He says, and what we did not know, that's we can't. What we don't know, we can't really tell you what it was. Or it could be what he said loudly, we recited loudly. What he did secretly, that may be the better understanding. What he did secretly, we made secretly. وَإِن لَمْ تَزِدْ عَلَى أُمِّ الْقُرْآنِ أَجْزَأَتْ وَإِن زِدْتَ فَهُوَ خَيْرٌ. This is here. He says, if you don't recite anything after al-Quran, أَجْزَأَتْ, it is sufficient. But if you add to it, فَهُوَ خَيْرٌ, it is better. That is why if somebody misses a surah after the Fatiha, he does not necessarily have to do sujood al-sahw. المذهب الحنبلي, I think they make it as a wajib. We read the wajibat al-salah in madhab al-hanbali before. Did they talk about the surah after? If it's a wajib for them or not? Somebody remind us? Mazhab al-Hanbali. It's coming here, one second. I just want to give you this. Yeah, it's coming here. In Madhab al-Hanbali, the wajibat al-salah, I'll recite them to you again. The takbirs between the transition. Sami Allahu liman hamida, Rabbana lakal hamd. Subhana Rabbiyal Azim, Subhana Rabbiyal A'la. Allahumma ghfirli, in between the sajda. Reciting the first tashahhud. Sitting for reciting the first tashahhud, and that is it. They did not mention the surah after Fatiha as a wajib either. Okay, so it's probably sunnah. Stop here. Any question about this?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, did he complete surah every time in each rak'ah that he prayed?
Most of the time, yes. The sunnah was that if he started a surah, he would complete it in the same rak'ah or at least between the 2 rak'at. But rarely he would actually recite only a few verses just to show them it's allowed, but that's not the habit. Correct? And so what we're doing here regularly is not really the sunnah. When we recite only 3 or 4 verses here, 3 and 4 verses here, the sunnah was to recite usually a full surah. And that is why when Mu'adh ibn Jabal went and started reciting Surah Al-Baqarah, and a man heard him starting Surah Al-Baqarah, he didn't wait for the first 100 ayat. He immediately says, Assalamu alaikum. Did his takbir, finished his salah and went. So why did he do that? Maybe
He doesn't want to sleep there.
because he knows that the habit is once the surah started, it will be finished. Whether in 1 rak'ah or 2 rak'ah, but it will be finished. So we stop here, inshallah.
Another question.
Yes, what is it?
During Maghrib Salat, if someone come in and join the last rak'ah, then he wants to pay back the remaining 2 that he missed.
Yes.
The tradition I'm aware of is that they say the first one, then do taslim, then go back and pay the last one. But I've seen people that combine the last 2 that they make one with Imam, then when they want to pay the remaining two, is combined. Is that possible?
How can they combine them? How can they combine the two rakat that they missed?
They missed two.
Yes, they missed two already.
Yes, because the first one is that you have to do taslim 3 times. You do one with Imam, then you get up and do one rakah, then you sit back and you do another one.
Taslim?
Tashahud.
No, exactly. Tashahud.
Yeah, we do 3 tashahud.
Yes.
But in this situation, after done what tashahud with Imam, then he stood up and did the 2 that was missed at a stretch, and did one tashahud, then taslim.
Yes.
Is that also acceptable?
Yeah. In Maghrib, sometimes you will have to do 4 tashahud. How is that? Can somebody figure it out?
Yeah. When you come,
If you come in second rak'ah, you catch the tashahud. You caught the tashahud, but not the rak'ah. So you've only actually done one rak'ah with him, with the imam. Then you will do the third rak'ah with the imam. That's your first rak'ah. That's your first rak'ah, and there's a tashahud. Now you've already done 2 tashahud, but you only done 1 rak'ah. So the second rak'ah, that now the first rak'ah that you're making up out of the 2, that is your second rak'ah. So there's a tashahud in the middle. Then you get up and you do your third rak'ah, and that's another tashahud. That's how you should do it. The rak'ah that you catch is your first rak'ah. It's your first rak'ah. It's not your third rak'ah and then you're going backwards. No. You follow? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.